Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm James, continuing on with my Balsa USA Stingray 120 build. Okay folks, well I'm happy to say that this is going to be the final step in the build. I'm going to be installing the remaining pieces of equipment, which include the final electronic pieces such as the battery packs, the receiver, the electronic ignition, and all the switches. And I'm also going to be installing the propeller and the prop nut that I have, and all that stuff's in that little bin right down there. But the key thing at this point is that I also need to check the balance. So I've held off on putting these remaining pieces in because I need to make sure that I got the balance correct. So what I have over here in the back there is the rack that I've made. It's just a balancing rack that I made out of PVC pipes. And then I also marked the center of balance, or the center of balance on the wing, on the underside of the wing, which is basically right at the main wing spar. So I'm going to go ahead and set the plane up on this, and I'm just going to put those pieces, sort of just have them on the front of the fuselage there. I'm not going to attach everything in. I'm just going to pile them on the top there and see if I can get the balance correct. And then once I get the balance correct, then I'll go ahead and install everything. And then looking under the plane, you'll see that I marked the center of balance right there on that yellow tape. It's right at, like I said, it's right at the main wing spar, and I put that additional tape down because this plane weighs a lot and I don't want to poke through the monocoat, so I need to be very, very careful. But I put that extra tape down just to kind of support the monocoat better. Okay, to start with, I'm just going to go ahead and install my propeller. This may not be the one that I end up using, but it's a big enough size for this engine. This will work just for the test here. This is just an APC. I think this is a 14-inch. So there's that, and then I have this, I don't know if I'll use this washer or not, but I'm just going to be using this. This is a Miracle, I guess it's a Miracle Hobby hub, or prop hub, and I'm just going to put this guy on here. And again, I don't need to make it perfect. I'm not going to tighten it down. I'm just going to have it on there just for the weight. It looks like I'm going to have to use a washer to get this thing to work properly. I'll deal with that later, but I'm just go ahead and put one nut on here just because I know I'll be adding that little bit of weight on it anyhow, so I'll put that on there. It's not going to be the way it's going to be set up on the final, but this will just get me the weight I need. And then real quick, here's my balancing rack I just made out of PVC pipe. I use this also for just a rack in general. I have it just different configurations. Up here on top I use these sort of like T-fittings, and you can see how I set them up here, and this way I'll put the plane on here and hopefully it'll balance and rotate okay. Again, I want to make sure that I don't damage the wing, so I want to make sure that I get that set up correctly and just be very careful. I actually sanded down the edges out here so they don't have a sharp edge on the outside of these pieces here, and I smoothed these off, so hopefully it'll be okay. Okay, well, as you can see, I got the plane balanced. I had to do it off camera because it was hard getting everything on there, obviously. But I have up here in the front, I have the battery packs, the electronic ignition, the switches. I put the receiver in the back a little bit. But as you can see, it's balanced. Looks like it's going to be pretty good to have it set up the way I have it now. And if I go underneath the wing, we'll take a look. And you can see the balancing mark is pretty much right on where it needs to be. Go over here on this side. Hopefully it didn't pop back or anything. Yeah, and you can kind of see that. So if the center of balance, the thing about this is you want to err on it being a little bit nose heavy. You don't want the plane to be tail heavy. Tail heavy is a really bad thing when it comes to your balance. So if you can get it to be a little bit nose heavy, or if it is a little bit nose heavy, I should say, it's not going to be the end of the world. So looks like I have a little bit of room to work here, but it's pretty much right on right now. So now I'll take it all apart, take it all down, and we'll install these last bits and pieces here. All right, well, before we get started putting everything else in the plane, I did want to mention the center of balance one more time. Here it is on the plan, shown right there. And then, you know, you can see it's pretty much right here in the thickest part of the wing. And this is right where the main spar is. But what I do is, you know, I measure it. I measure from the tip on the plans. I measure from the tip back to the center of balance as it's shown here. I draw a line through the, sort of through the center line of the center of balance symbol itself. And I just kind of do this, and that gives me the measurement. And then I just take this and I put that, just slap it on the wing, and I mark it, and I just check it. So again, you know, it was pretty easy to find because it was right at that main spar, so I could feel it. But I just like to check it, so that's how I measured it. The first thing I'm going to install is going to be the ignition module, which is going to be mounted right in here. And then just so you can see where I'm going with it, it's kind of hard with the camera here, but it's going to go right inside here, mounted up against this side wall. So as you can see, the ignition module is just a cube, if you will, and there's really no way to mount it as is. So I need to make a mounting bracket or a mounting plate for it. So there are all kinds of ways to mount equipment in your plane. And usually it depends on the plane you're building, the piece of equipment you have, the materials that you have on hand, and things like this. So it's always some kind of a custom way of doing it. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. As long as you can get your equipment mounted in the plane and it's secure, and also you want to be able to take it out. You know, I'm not fond of putting something in that I can't get out of the plane if I need to do maintenance and things like that. So one of the ways that I like to do this is to use this stuff. So this is just some extruded foam insulation. This is a 2x2 foot panel by 1 inch thick that I got at my local hardware store. The brand is Owens Corning. They call it their Foamular. It's kind of hard for me to say. Foamular is the actual brand name of it. There's other brands out there, and it comes in different sizes, but this is a nice size. I think this was only around $5 or so that I picked up. So the thing about this, what I like about this for RC stuff, for constructing, is that it's light. Obviously it's a foam, and because it's an extruded foam material, it may be hard to see, but it's actually a very fine grained or fine texture material. It's not like that kind of rough or that kind of popcorn looking kind of white foam you see like for packing material and things like that. This stuff is very, very fine, and the thing about it is it's dense and it's very strong. It's stiff, and what I like about it is I can cut a piece out and I can carve it to whatever shape I need. I can cut several pieces out if I want, and I can kind of build things up with it and glue it together with epoxy, and it's very strong. And then what I like to do is I glue this into the plane itself, and then I use, that's what I'll be doing today, I'll use some Velcro straps with it, and essentially I'll build a small little mounting bracket, and then I'll glue it into the airplane, and then I'll just use Velcro to attach it to that bracket. And then I can easily take out whatever piece of equipment I put in. I can easily just take it out. And like I've said, my experience with this stuff is that it works really well, and I've had no problems with it. And I don't know if I mentioned the price or not, but this was, I can't remember, but it was only like $5 or something for this whole sheet. And I use it, you know, it takes me a long time to use it up, so it's really worth the price. And if you make a mistake, you just go ahead and start over again. It's kind of pretty forgiving to work with. So the first thing I'm going to do is just trace my ignition module roughly where it's, how big it is here. Let's see here. And since it's going inside the plane, it doesn't have to be perfect. No one's going to see it. And then for this material, I like to use a very long sort of blade like this. These are really nice, these sort of disposable ones like this, because you need something long. If you try to use a small X-Acto blade, something like this, you're not going to get all the way through it because this material is inch thick. So I like to use something a little bit longer. So I'm carefully just going to cut this out. And there we go. So now I'm just going to go ahead and shape this the way that I think it needs to be done. Obviously it's not going to be this thick. I don't need it that big. But let me go ahead and I'll shape it. I'm basically going to probably go about half as thick as it is here. And I'm going to cut a couple grooves in it for the Velcro to attach to. You'll see what I mean as I go here. Let me grab my Velcro straps. I have this nice little roll of Velcro I got at the hardware store again. It comes in these little pieces like this, and I think, depending on how thick I make the actual foam, I may need to use 2 of them. So we'll see. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with just cutting the grooves for the Velcro. Okay, so you can kind of see how this is going to work. I'm going to glue these Velcro strips onto the little block I'm making, and this is going to get epoxied into the airplane. And then these are going to wrap around and hold the ignition module on. Now, one thing I need to do for this, which may be a little bit hard to explain, but inside the fuselage I have a doubler sort of on the outer part of the wall, and on the inner part of the wall it's just the balsa. So there's actually a step in there which is about 1/8 of an inch high, if you will. So I'm going to make one side of this about 1/8 of an inch shorter than the other side, so that when I stick it in there it'll be nice and flat. And you'll see what I mean when I go to mount this. So carefully just going to mark it here. 1/8 of an inch. So I'll just have to make some adjustments as I go. And hopefully you can see by using a long blade like this, it makes it very, very easy to kind of manipulate and work around this material. If I was using a short blade, it would be really hard. Okay. All right, so that's about, so now I'm going to go ahead and deepen my channels for my Velcro. So hopefully you can see what I was talking about. See how this doubler is here, and then I got that steps down to the side wall. And if I can get my piece of foam in here, hopefully you'll see this. If I put it like so. Yeah. So it'll be like that. And you kind of see how I made that little step in it. Hope that makes sense. So now we'll see how it works with the Velcro. So again, I'm going to use a strip of Velcro here. We'll put this on here like this, flip it over, just for a test run. Nice, if I can get it straight. There we go. Okay, there's that one. Now I think these are going to be too short to go the other way, so I'm going to go ahead and get another one and trim it. And obviously, Velcro's Velcro. Get what you get. You know, this is the stuff that I have on hand right now, so I'm cutting it as I need. So go through here. So I got plenty now. Okay, so now you can see how that's going to hold in the plane, and we'll just epoxy this all together into the plane itself. So I'm going to go ahead and glue the Velcro on first onto the back here. I'm going to be using my Bob Smith Industries 30-minute epoxy. Okay, while this one cures, I'll show you that I've already made one for my battery pack. The way I'm going to have my battery set up is very similar. I have two batteries because I have a battery for the servos and the receiver and all that, and then I have a battery obviously for the ignition system. So I'm going to be using this 5-cell 6-volt battery for my receiver and servos. And then I made like a little piece to go in between the two batteries, and I just kind of cut some little grooves just to help, maybe to help it kind of keep cool. And this guy will go on top of here like this. And of course I will, oops, lordy. Get over there, buddy. Like that, and then this one will go on here. And this is going to sit straight down in the bottom of the airplane like this. So it should be pretty secure. And again, this is going to be epoxied in like that. Okay, well, I've let this sit and cure. So let me go ahead and pull these pins out and we can mount it in the airplane. And I'm just going to be using the same glue. I'm going to be using my, again, the Bob Smith Industries 30-minute epoxy for this. So we'll put some on the back here and we'll stick it in the airplane. Okay, well, I end up letting this sit overnight, and now it's ready to go. I'm going to pull the pins out. Also, you notice I installed the one for the battery here in the bottom. Since I had the glue out, I might as well do them both at the same time. So let me go ahead and pull the pins out, and then we'll install the battery and the electronic ignition. So I have these two installed now. Of course, here's the electronic ignition module. Then down here in the bottom are my batteries, as you can see down there. And then these are the leads coming off of. Here's the lead coming off the ignition module. That's going to go to the battery itself. And then these two are going to hook up to the engine. And then, of course, my leads to the batteries are down there. So the next step is to install my switches and then my receiver. So I made another mount out of the foam for the receiver, as you can see here, and with the Velcro. And what I'm going to do, like with the others, with the battery and the ignition module, I'm going to epoxy it into the fuselage here, and I'm going to put it right under, kind of just right above those control rods on this side of the bulkhead. So it's going to be back in here. It's kind of hard to show everything with my hands in the way, but it's going to go right back in there. All right, so there it is pinned to that bulkhead. We'll let that epoxy cure, then we'll come back and continue on with the additional steps. So the epoxy for the receiver mount is now cured, and I can pop this in here carefully. I realize my finger's going to get in the way. Like that. Then of course I have my antenna that I'm going to have to adjust later. But we'll get this on here. Excuse my hands. Okay, something like that. It's pretty good. Now I'll move on to the switches. I have two switches here. I have a kind of heavy duty one that I'm going to be using for the servos, and then I'm going to be using the smaller switch for the ignition on the engine. And the way I'm going to put them on here, I'm going to put them in line here on the side. I'm going to put the smaller one up here in front for the engine, and I'll put the larger one right here behind it. Okay, well, everything is now installed in the airplane, and the last thing I need to do here is to make all of the connections. So I have the switch again coming off the engine, which is going to connect to the ignition module and the battery. I have the switch over here for the servos and the receiver. I'm going to have to add a couple extensions that come off the receiver that are going to attach to the ailerons. So when I can plug in the ailerons when I put the wing on. And then I also need to add a couple extensions now again to the rudder and the elevator servos, because they just don't meet all the way. So I have a couple of extension wires for that. So I'm going to put all these on, and then I'm going to be using, in the process, I'm going to be using my shrink wrap, or not the shrink wrap, but the shrink tubing, the heat shrink tubing used for electronics, which I've talked about before. So I'll use some of this. And then for the ailerons, I'll color coat them. I'll use yellow maybe for one and red or something like that for each one. And then I'll color code them to match the ones coming off the wing, so that when I'm in the field, I can just easily plug them together without having to think too hard about which plug goes where. Okay, well, I have all the wiring now connected. It was a lengthy process. To do it on camera wouldn't have made a lot of sense, because it's hard to get into all these locations and my hands would be in the way and it's just a bunch of wires, so I decided to just do it off camera. But real quick here, so here is my aileron leads. Marked them. I marked this one 6 left for my 6-channel left wing, and then this one's my 1 right, my 1 channel for the right. It corresponds over here to the leads coming off my ailerons from the wing. In here, quick in the compartment here, you can see back in here I have the receiver set up right back down in there, and then there's just a bunch of spaghetti in here with everything else attached. My switches are attached. These are the leads right here that are going to be for the chargers for the different batteries. There's a lead coming off of those. Of course, here's my connection going to my engine from my ignition module. So yeah, so everything's inside there and set up and ready to go. And now what I need to do is move on to the engine, and we're just going to get the engine hooked up, put the prop on, and go from there. Now let's install the spark plug wire. This is pretty tough to get this on there. It's a pretty stiff connection, but it needs to be nice and strong all the way on. Just like that. And then the engine comes with these exhaust tubes. These are just plastic, and they're going to go on each side here. We'll pull these out. They just pop right on. These just help direct the exhaust away from the fuselage. Or if you had a cowled engine, then these would extend out of your cowl. And they're just held on with these retainers. Okay, now let's flip her over and we'll put the prop on. For my prop, I'm going to be using this Master Air Screw 16.6, so it's a 16-inch diameter with a numbered 6 pitch. Of course, it's made out of wood, as you can see here. Slide this on. Okay, as mentioned before, I did purchase this prop hub. This is from Miracle Hobby, and you can see it's got the DLE-20 size engine on here. It's listed. A couple other engines also are on here, and it's made out of aluminum. The thing about it is that it's actually not deep enough to fit over the length of the prop shaft here. And when I put it on, there was about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more gap. So what I did is I drilled this out and I tapped it, and you can kind of see the hole that I made. I went all the way through it just to give myself enough room, and it does fit on here now. I'm not sure I'm going to go with this. I'm going to try it out now. I may switch it out for a spinner or a different type later, but for now I'll try this out. And that being said, I would not recommend this particular product for the DLE-20 because you don't want to modify things if you don't have to. So let me go ahead and slip this on. Goes like that. And then to tighten it on, I'm just going to use a nail to go through the hole here and get it on here. All right, there we go. Okay, now we are back to the balancing stand. So everything is now completely finished with the airplane. Everything is in, and it is now ready for the final checks before the maiden flight. And I'm happy to say that I'm finished after many, many months. I'm finally finished with the Balsa USA Stingray 120 build. And I'm really happy to say that I actually got my balance right on. And you know, it was a process that I had to kind of trial and error. I started with like I showed you in the beginning of the video, I set things up on top of it, and then as I put things in, like the battery and the ignition module and that, I came back and I checked it again, and I did the final, putting the switches on and the wiring and everything else. And I'm really happy, like I said, that the balance worked out pretty good. And now I'll just show you, I'm underneath the plane obviously, I'll show you where my balancing mark is, and I have it right on, and it looks really, really good. Now it's going to be a little bit nose heavy when I put the fuel in it because my fuel tank is still sort of in front of my center of balance, but that's perfect, that's fine. And here's a front view of our DLE-20 ready to go. Now this is a new engine. I did run it a couple times for a break-in, and I still need to get it running. I'm going to do a test stand before I take it out for the flight. I'm actually going to get it going and make sure everything's working okay. I want the engine to run, and I want to see how the plane kind of reacts to that because this is a pretty beefy engine and they can rattle around. So I just want to make sure, I'm going to do a couple checks just to make sure nothing comes undone or gets loose, and kind of do a couple checks before I actually get it for the maiden flight. As I mentioned, I do need to do a couple checks. So I want to make sure all of my adjustments are correct for all of my control surfaces. I want to check the engine. I want to go over it again just before I take it out. So I'm going to be spending the next few days doing that before we do the maiden flight. But yeah, she is finished, and I am really happy. And thanks again. I really appreciate everybody who's been watching this build and commenting along the way. I've learned a lot from all of you, and just got lots of really good tips and suggestions from people. So there it is, and stay tuned so that you can check out the main flight here coming up pretty soon.